The thin, icy rain plastered Ilara's rags to her skin, but it was the cold from within that made her tremble. She was on her knees, mud and filth from the forest floor caking her hands as she prostrated herself on the gleaming black marble of the Alpha King's throne room. Before her, shadows and power coalesced into a single, terrifying form, King Kalen, the Iron Alpha of the Winterfang Pack. His scent dominated the air, crushing notes of ancient pine, sharp snow, and a metallic, predatory power that demanded submission. Her children, Leo and Maya, were huddled against her back, two tiny, shivering bundles of bone and fear. Maya's cough was a dry, rasping sound that tore Ilara's soul apart with every echo. She had no pride left, no The thin, icy rain plastered Ilara's rags to her skin, but it was the cold from within that made her tremble. She was on her knees, mud and filth from the forest floor caking her hands as she prostrated herself on the gleaming black marble of the Alpha King's throne room. Before her, shadows and power coalesced into a single terrifying form, King Kalen, the Iron Alpha of the Winterfang Pack. His scent dominated the air, crushing notes of ancient pine, sharp snow, and a metallic, predatory power that demanded submission. Her children, Leo and Maya, were huddled against her back, two tiny, shivering bundles of bone and fear. Maya's cough was a dry, rasping sound that tore Ilara's soul apart with every echo. She had no pride left, no status, not even a pack. She had only this one, final, desperate gamble. Lifting her chin, she met his gaze, eyes as cold and gray as the winter sky, and choked out the words that were her last and only coin. "My children haven't eaten for days. If you feed them, I'll be yours forever." Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. The silence that followed her plea was a living thing. It pressed in on her, heavier than the king's power, filled with the collective, horrified gasp of the assembled court. She could feel their judgment like a physical blow, the disgust of the high-born females in their furs and jewels, the contempt of the broad-shouldered warriors lining the walls. Rogues were not permitted in the citadel, let alone the throne room. To be here was a death sentence. To beg was an aberration. "Majesty," a smooth voice interjected. Beta Marcus, the king's right hand, stepped forward. He was sleek and strategic, his eyes never leaving Ilara. "This is highly irregular. She carries the rogue scent." "She is unclean. Allowing her presence here defiles the sacred chamber." Kalen did not look at his beta. His gaze remained locked on Ilara, a dispassionate, assessing stare that stripped her bare. He saw the desperation, yes, but he also saw the hollows in her cheeks, the bruised terror in her eyes, and the defiant way she kept her shoulders squared, shielding her young. He was a king, and a king's first duty was the strength of the pack. Charity was weakness, pity was a cancer. Then he looked at the children. The little girl, Maya, peeked out from behind Ilara's matted hair. She was so small, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes unnaturally large and sunken. The boy, Leo, maybe 4 years old, glared. "She is unclean. Allowing her presence here defiles the sacred chamber." Kalen did not look at his beta. His gaze remained locked on Ilara, a dispassionate, assessing stare that stripped her bare. He saw the desperation, yes, but he also saw the hollows in her cheeks, the bruised terror in her eyes, and the defiant way she kept her shoulders squared, shielding her young. He was a king, and a king's first duty was the strength of the pack. Charity was weakness. Pity was a cancer. Then he looked at the children. The little girl, Maya, peeked out from behind Alara's matted hair. She was so small, her face streaked with dirt, her eyes unnaturally large and sunken. The boy, Leo, maybe 4 years old, glared. He was tiny, his ribs visible even through his wet tunic, but his gaze was a miniature version of the king's own, pure, undiluted defiance. He held a sharpened stick in one tiny fist. The king's wolf, a monstrous, ancient creature he kept chained in iron deep within himself, stirred. It did not stir with pity. It stirred with a primal, territorial offense. Cubs, starving. Kalen rose from his throne. The movement was fluid, silent, and utterly lethal. He descended the 3 steps, each footfall echoing in the vast hall, until he loomed over her. Alara automatically flinched, pulling her children tighter. He crouched, a mountain of muscle and fur-lined black leather, bringing his face level with hers. "You would be mine." His voice was a low rumble, vibrating through the marble floor and up into her bones. "Forever." "Anything," she whispered, tears finally breaking free, tracking clean paths through the grime on her face. "My life, my service, my body, anything, just, please. They are fading. I can't feel my little girl's shift anymore. She's too weak." This, at last, caused a flicker in the king's icy gaze. A cub too weak to access its wolf was a cub on the very brink of death. He looked at the boy. "What is your name, pup?" Leo's eyes narrowed. "Don't care." Ilara gasped. "Leo, no, hush!" Kalen's lip quirked, a terrifying expression that held no humor. "He has spirit. And yours, little one?" Maya hid her face, coughing again. "She is Maya," Ilara answered for her. Kalen stood, turning his back on them in a gesture of absolute dismissal. The hope that had flickered in Ilara's chest died, turning to cold ash. He had refused. He would have them thrown out or executed. "Marcus," the king said, his voice booming in the hall. "My king, take the woman to the kennels. She will work there. The scent of rogue will be masked by the scent of hound. She will be housed and fed with the kennel hands." Ilara's head snapped up. She didn't dare breathe. "And the cubs?" Marcus asked, his tone carefully neutral. Kalen paused, his hand on the arm of his throne. "The cubs will be taken to the kitchens. Inform Martha they are to be scrubbed, deloused, and fed. They will earn their keep as scullery hands when they are able." He sat, the very picture of bored royalty, and picked up a scroll from the table beside him. "You are now my property," he stated, not to her, but to the room at large. "You are bound by your oath. If you run, my wolves will hunt you down, and I will execute your children myself. Do you understand?" "Yes," Ilara sobbed, bowing her head so low her forehead touched the cold, filthy floor. Thank you, Alpha King." "Get her out of my sight," he ordered, and already his attention was on the scroll, as if the most desperate moment of Ilara's life was nothing more than a dull administrative task, now concluded. Guards hoisted Ilara to her feet. She stumbled, her legs numb. "Leo, Maya, go with the man," she urged, frantic, as Marcus moved toward the children. "It's okay, you'll get food. Go." Leo clung to her. "No, I stay with you." "You will go," Marcus commanded, his voice sharp. He grabbed Leo's arm. The boy, in a burst of desperate strength, bit him. Marcus roared, backhanding the child. Leo flew across the floor, his head cracking against the marble. He lay still. "No!" Ilara screamed, fighting against the guards. "Leo!" Before anyone could move, a dark blur crossed the room. Kalen was suddenly there, hauling Marcus up by the front of his tunic, lifting the beta clean off his feet. The king's eyes were not gray. They were black, the pupils consuming the iris. "You ever," Kalen snarled, his voice a low, guttural vibration, "strike a cub in my citadel again, beta, and I will rip your throat out with my own teeth. Is that clear?" Marcus, choking, his face pale with terror, could only nod. Kalen dropped him. The boy, in a burst of desperate strength, bit him. Marcus roared, backhanding the child. Leo flew across the floor, his head cracking against the marble. He lay still. "No!" Ilara screamed, fighting against the guards. "Leo!" Before anyone could move, a dark blur crossed the room. Kalen was suddenly there, hauling Marcus up by the front of his tunic, lifting the beta clean off his feet. The king's eyes were not gray. They were black, the pupils consuming the iris. "You," Kalen snarled, his voice a low, guttural vibration, "strike a cub in my citadel again, beta, and I will rip your throat out with my own teeth. Is that clear?" Marcus, choking, his face pale with terror, could only nod. Kalen dropped him. He turned, scooped up the unconscious Leo in one massive arm, and looked at the trembling Maya. "Come, child." He didn't offer a hand. He simply started walking. Terrified, Maya scrambled to her feet and ran to keep up with his massive strides, her tiny hand gripping the edge of his fur cloak. The court watched, stunned into utter silence, as their Iron King, the Alpha who despised weakness, who had never shown an ounce of paternal warmth, walked from the throne room, carrying a half-dead rogue cub, with another trotting, terrified at his heels. Ilara, held fast by the guards, could only watch them go, her heart a warring mess of terror and a strange, agonizing hope. Her bargain was struck. Her children would eat, and she belonged to him. The kitchens were a hell of steam, noise, and shouting, but to Leo and Maya it was paradise. Kalen had delivered them to the kitchen's mistress, Martha, an older, thick-bodied she-wolf with scars on her arms and a permanent scowl. "King's orders," he'd rumbled, depositing Leo on a flour-dusted bench. "Feed them." Martha had looked at the filthy, half-starved children, then at her king, her expression unreadable. "Aye, Alpha." As soon as Kalen was gone, she had grabbed them both by the scruff of their tunics. "Right, you stink. Bath first, then food. And don't you dare think you'll be idle. We work here." Leo had woken up, confused and aching, but the moment Martha mentioned food, he'd become docile. She had them scrubbed raw in a tub of lukewarm, soapy water by the massive hearth, their filthy rags burned. She dressed them in old potato sacks cut with holes for their arms and heads. And then she sat them at a small wooden table in the corner and placed 2 bowls of thick, meaty stew and a hunk of black bread in front of them. They ate like starving wolves, not even breathing, their hands shaking as they shoveled the food into their mouths. When they were done, Maya looked at the empty bowl, then at Martha and whispered. As soon as Kalen was gone, she had grabbed them both by the scruff of their tunics. "Right, you stink. Bath first, then food. And don't you dare think you'll be idle. We work here." Leo had woken up, confused and aching, but the moment Martha mentioned food, he'd become docile. She had them scrubbed raw in a tub of lukewarm, soapy water by the massive hearth. Their filthy rags burned. She dressed them in old potato sacks cut with holes for their arms and heads. And then she sat them at a small wooden table in the corner and placed 2 bowls of thick, meaty stew and a hunk of black bread in front of them. They ate like starving wolves, not even breathing, their hands shaking as they shoveled the food into their mouths. When they were done, Maya looked at the empty bowl, then at Martha, and whispered, "More?" Martha's scowl deepened. She refilled the bowls. They ate that too, and a third. Finally, their bellies distended, the primal desperation faded from their eyes. Leo's head began to nod. Maya was already asleep, her face falling into the remnants of her stew. Martha grunted. She picked them both up, one under each arm, and deposited them on a pile of clean, empty flour sacks in a warm, dry corner by the bread oven. They were asleep before they even settled. For the first time in their lives, they were full, they were warm, and they were safe. Ilara's introduction to her new life was far harsher. The kennels were on the windward side of the keep, a long, low stone building that stank of wet fur, old bones, and animal waste. The hounds of the Alpha King were nearly as large as wolves, bred for war and hunting. They snapped and snarled as she was shoved inside, their eyes glowing in the gloom. Her rogue scent drove them to a frenzy. "This is your post," the guard told her, his lip curled in disgust. Housed in there, he pointed to a tiny, windowless room at the far end, fed when the hounds are. "Your job is to muck the stalls, haul the water, and clean the pelts. Don't get eaten." He slammed the heavy wooden door, plunging her into near total darkness, save for the slivers of light coming through the ill-fitting planks of the walls. The hounds barked and lunged against their enclosures. Ilara sank to the straw-covered floor, buried her face in her hands, and let the first wave of despair wash over her. She was cold. She was terrified. She was surrounded by hostile beasts. But then she thought of Leo and Maya, their bellies full, asleep in the warmth of the kitchens. She took a shaky breath, the stench of the kennels filling her lungs. She had made her bargain. She would keep it. She stood up, her muscles aching, and found a pitchfork leaning against the wall. She was a servant, but she was alive, and so were her children. The next few weeks fell into a brutal, monotonous rhythm. Ilara's life became a cycle of hauling, scrubbing, and dodging the teeth of the warhounds. Her hands, once soft, became cracked, calloused, and raw. The kennel master, a grizzled, silent male named Torin, worked her from before sunrise until long after dark. He spoke to her only to give orders. She was an it. It needs to haul more water. It missed a stall. The other kennel hands, rough, low-ranking pack members, ignored her. To them, she was less than nothing, a rogue, a dusk wolf, as they'd taken to calling her, a creature of the shadows, scentless and shiftless. She was beneath their notice. She ate her meager portion of gruel alone, huddled in her tiny, cold room, which was little more than a closet with a pile of straw for a bed. But twice a day she was allowed a brief respite. In the mid-morning, when she hauled the kitchen scraps to the hounds, and late at night when she returned the empty buckets. The first time she'd entered the kitchens, Martha had brandished a ladle at her. You're not allowed in the main hall. Stay by the door. Drop the buckets and go. Please, Ilara had begged. My children. They're fine, Martha snapped, eating like they're hoarding for winter. Now get. But as Ilara turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of them. Maya was sitting at the table, her cheeks already losing their hollows, braiding garlic cloves with a few other kitchen children. Leo was vigorously scrubbing a pot that was bigger than he was, arguing with another boy. They were alive. They were rosy. Ilara's heart ached with a relief so profound it almost buckled her knees. She fled back to the kennels, the image burning in her mind. It was enough. It had to be. Kalen saw her. He did not interact with her. He did not speak to her. But he was the Alpha King. Nothing happened in his keep without his knowledge. He found himself altering his path from the training grounds, his long strides taking him past the kennels. He would stand in the shadows of a far archway and watch. He saw her face down a snarling hound that had broken its chain, her voice low and steady, her hand outstretched, until the beast, confused by her lack of fear and her null scent, retreated. He saw her tending to one of the hunting dogs, a bitch with a torn paw, wrapping it with scraps of her own tunic when Torin had dismissed the beast as cur meat. She was gentle, efficient, and fearless. And he found himself walking the upper balconies that overlooked the kitchen courtyard, timing his patrols with the children's break time. He told himself he was ensuring his property wasn't causing trouble, but he watched. He watched Leo get into a shoving match with a larger kitchen boy, and instead of backing down, Leo had tackled the boy, landing a surprisingly solid punch before the cooks broke it up. The king's wolf had felt a strange, unwelcome surge of approval. He watched Maya, who was quiet and sweet, humming a tune as she sorted herbs. He heard her laugh, a bright, tinkling sound that echoed in the stone courtyard. Kalen stopped. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard a child laugh within the citadel walls. His keep was a place of iron, of training, of duty. It was not a place of laughter. The sound pricked at something cold and hard inside his chest. He dismissed it, turning away, irritated by the distraction. She was a tool, a bargain. The children were a byproduct, nothing more. The confrontation happened on a crisp, cold afternoon. Ilara was hauling a heavy wooden bucket of kennel waste across the main courtyard, her head down, her muscles burning. She was exhausted. A group of high-born ladies was taking the air, led by Lady Seraphina, a tall, beautiful, and ambitious she-wolf whose father sat on Kalen's council. Seraphina had made no secret of her desire to be the Alpha Queen. As Ilara passed, Seraphina stepped directly into her path. Ilara tried to swerve, but it was too late. She stumbled over the hem of Seraphina's velvet gown, sending the bucket toppling. Foul, stinking waste splashed across the pristine stones and onto the very tips of Seraphina's fur-lined boots. The courtyard went silent. "You filthy thing!" Seraphina hissed, her beautiful face contorted with rage. You dare soil me!" "My lady, I am so sorry," Ilara stammered, dropping to her knees, trying to scoop the mess back into the bucket with her bare hands. "I didn't see." "Of course you didn't, gutter rat," another lady sneered. "Its eyes are probably as dull as its scent." Seraphina's eyes glinted with malice. "The king may have shown you a bizarre mercy, rogue, but you are still just filth. You exist on his charity, a charity he will soon tire of." She drew back her foot and kicked Ilara hard in the ribs. Ilara cried out, curling into a ball. "Perhaps a reminder of your place is in order," Seraphina said, signaling to two nearby guards. "Take it to the whipping post. 10 lashes for insubordination and soiling a high-born." The guards hesitated. Whipping a servant was common, but this servant was the king's direct property. "Did you hear me?" Seraphina snapped. "There will be no whipping." The voice cut through the air like a blade of ice. Kalen emerged from the keep's main entrance, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't have to. The power rolling off him made the air crackle. "My king," Seraphina said, instantly adopting a sweet, wounded tone. "This creature assaulted me. It threw its filth." "I saw what happened," Kalen said, his eyes never leaving her. He walked until he stood between Seraphina and the cowering Ilara. You tripped her." Seraphina's face paled. "My king, I would never." "Lady Seraphina," Kalen interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. "You forget your place." He crouched, and to the utter shock of everyone present, he offered a hand to Ilara. She stared at it, trembling. His hand was huge, scarred, and clean. Tentatively, she placed her small, filthy hand in his. He pulled her to her feet, his grip like a steel manacle. He kept her hand in his, standing over her, his massive form a shield. "She is mine," he stated, his gaze sweeping over the stunned crowd. His scent, that overwhelming wave of pine and snow, flared, covering Ilara, marking her, drowning out the smell of the kennels, the waste, and her own null scent. It was a possessive, primal act of dominance. "Whether she is a servant or a queen, she holds my claim. You will not touch her. You will not speak to her. You will not look at her. If you do, you answer to me." Seraphina looked as if she'd been struck. "Kalen, Alpha, I meant no disrespect to you." "You disrespect what is mine. You disrespect me," he growled. "Go." Seraphina, humiliated and furious, gathered her ladies and swept from the courtyard, her eyes promising murder. Kalen stood for a long moment, the silence broken only by Ilara's shaky breathing. Then he looked down at her. His eyes were cold again, the brief flare of possessiveness gone. "Do not mistake this for affection, rogue," he said, his voice low and harsh. "I protect what is mine, and Alpha cannot allow his property to be damaged by ambitious subordinates. It shows weakness." He dropped her hand as if it were burning. "Clean up your mess and stay out of sight. You are causing complications." He turned and strode back into the keep, leaving Ilara standing in the middle of the courtyard, shaking, her ribs aching, and her heart torn. He had protected her. He had claimed her in front of the entire court, marking her with his scent. But his words were like knives, carving out any foolish hope that might have started to grow. She was property, a complication, nothing more. Life changed after that, not for the better. The court, led by Seraphina's whispers, now saw Ilara not just as filth, but as a problem. A rogue who had, through some dark magic or warish trick, garnered the king's bizarre protection. The servants spat in her food. The kennel hands accidentally left tools for her to trip over. Torin worked her twice as hard. She was isolated, exhausted, and more alone than ever. The only light continued to be the brief, stolen glimpses of her children. They were thriving. Leo was tough, quick, and had learned to navigate the kitchen hierarchy with a scrappy intelligence. Maya, with her sweet disposition, had been adopted by Martha, who now treated the little girl with a gruff, proprietary affection, teaching her herbs and spices. Ilara endured. She had to. The arrival of the Blood Moon delegation was announced with blaring horns a week later. The Blood Moon Pack held the treacherous, rocky territory to the north. They were known for their brutality, their scarred warriors, and their volatile alpha, Vorlag. Kalen's court was stiff and formal, the air thick with tension. The Winterfang Pack and the Blood Moon Pack were not allies. They were, at best, a breath away from war. Kalen sat on his throne, the picture of iron control, as Vorlag and his entourage entered the hall. Vorlag was a huge male, even bigger than Kalen. But where Kalen was lean, controlled power, Vorlag was scarred, blunt force trauma. His face was a ruin, one eye milky and blind, his scent a rancid mix of blood and rot. He strode to the center of the hall, his warriors spreading out, their hands on their weapons. "Kalen," he grunted, a mockery of a bow. "You grow comfortable in your ice palace." "Vorlag," Kalen replied, his voice flat. "You come a long way from your rocks. State your business." "Business," Vorlag chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "Always business. I am here to propose an alliance, a joining of our packs. Together, we could crush the Southern Territories." "I am not interested in crushing the Southern Territories," Kalen said. "No? Perhaps you are only interested in charity." Vorlag's one good eye scanned the room, and he sniffed the air. His gaze passed over the courtiers, the guards, and then, standing in the shadows of a service entrance, he saw her. Ilara had been ordered to bring warmed, spiced wine for the delegation. She had her head down, trying to be invisible, but the moment his gaze landed on her, she froze. Her blood turned to ice. Vorlag's scarred face split into a grotesque grin. He sniffed again, deeper. Well, well, ill be damned. He started walking toward her. Ilara trembled, dropping the heavy tray. It clattered to the marble, spilling dark wine like blood. She backed away, but she was trapped against the wall. "I thought you were dead," Vorlag snarled, his voice dropping. He was close now, close enough for her to smell the old blood on his fur cloak. "I thought the winter had eaten you, little dusk wolf." Ilara couldn't breathe. This was the male from her nightmares, the one who... "She is under my protection, Vorlag." Kalen's voice was quiet, but it sliced through Vorlag's malice. Kalen was on his feet, though he had not moved from the dais. Vorlag laughed. "Protection? This null scent? This traitor's daughter?" A shocked murmur went through the court. Ilara's eyes snapped to Vorlag's. "He wasn't a traitor," she spat, her terror momentarily eclipsed by a surge of fury. "He was," Vorlag sneered, "and you are his blood. I should have had my wolves hunt you down when you fled, but you weren't worth the effort. A shiftless omega, worthless." His eyes narrowed, and he sniffed again, leaning closer to her. His gaze dropped to her stomach, her hips. "But you smell of cubs." Ilara's heart stopped. "You had them," Vorlag whispered, his one eye widening with a hungry, vicious realization. "The traitor's line didn't end. You have cubs." In a flash, Kalen was no longer on the dais. He was in front of Ilara, his hand on the hilt of the greatsword at his back. It was a shocking breach of sacred hospitality. To draw a blade on a guest, even an enemy, was a profound taboo. "You are on my land," Vorlag growled, his body a solid wall between Ilara and the Blood Moon Alpha. "You will not threaten my property." The word property was a slap, but this time it was also a shield. Vorlag's eyes met Kalen's. The air in the room became so heavy it was hard to breathe. Two massive alphas locked in a silent, brutal challenge. Vorlag wanted to tear her apart. Kalen was forbidding it. Finally, Vorlag backed down, a slow, malicious grin spreading across his face. "Your property. I see. A kennel hand? How far the sun-touched line has fallen. From alpha to this?" He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Keep her. She's tainted goods." He turned back to Kalen. "My offer stands, but I want something else, too. The Sunstone. It is an artifact of my people, stolen by your ancestors." "The Sunstone is under the protection of the Winterfang Pack," Kalen said, his voice clipped. "It is not, and never will be, yours. My answer is no. To the Alliance and to the Stone." "You will regret this, Iron King," Vorlag snarled. "That stone belongs with the Blood Moon, and traitor's blood it always finds a way to spill." He turned and, with his warriors, stalked from the hall. The moment the great doors boomed shut, Kalen turned to Ilara. His face was a thundercloud. "Guards, take her to my study. Lock the door." Ilara's terror returned full force. "No, please, my children." "Now," Kalen commanded. She was dragged from the hall, the eyes of the entire court following her, their expressions of fear, suspicion, and contempt. Kalen's study was a stark, cold room, dominated by a massive oak desk and maps of the territory. He paced in front of the cold hearth like a caged lion. Ilara stood in the center of the room, trembling. He finally stopped and pinned her with his gaze. "You lied." I didn't." "You lied," he roared, slamming his fist on the desk. The sound made her jump. "You are the daughter of the Blood Moon Alpha. The traitor Alpha?" "His name was Alaric," she cried, finding her voice. "And he was not a traitor. He was my father. He was a good Alpha, kind. Vorlag was his beta. Vorlag wanted power. He poisoned my father's wine, challenged him when he was weak, and murdered him in the challenge circle. He called it a fair fight. It was execution." Kalen's expression didn't soften. "And you, a dusk wolf, a null scent?" Ilara flinched, shame washing over her. She nodded, looking at the floor. I cannot shift. I was born this way. My wolf, it's silent. It's why I was worthless, why he let me run." "He didn't know you were pregnant," Kalen stated. She shook her head, tears welling. "No, my mate, he was Vorlag's younger brother, a gentle wolf. Vorlag murdered him the same night he murdered my father, right in front of me. He said he was cleaning the bloodline. I ran. I just ran. I didn't even know I was pregnant until a month later. It was twins." She had been a rogue for 4 years, hiding in the wild, her null scent her only protection, making her harder to track. She had given birth alone in a cave and had kept her children alive by stealing from farms and traps, always moving, always one step from starvation. Kalen stared at her, his mind racing. The daughter of an alpha? Even a dead one. The bearer of his line. And a null wolf, a genetic impossibility? And this sun-touched he mentioned. "A stupid myth," Ilara whispered. "My father's line was rumored to be blessed by the moon goddess. A ridiculous story. Sun-touched was a name his enemies used to mock him. It meant nothing. My powerlessness proves it." Kalen was silent, but his fury was palpable. "You brought this to my door. You brought Vorlag." "I had no choice," she screamed, her desperation finally breaking through her fear. "My children were dying. I would have begged from the shadow god himself if I thought it would save them. I came here because you were the strongest, the most powerful. I knew you were the only one Vorlag feared." He stared at her, his gray eyes searching her face. He was torn. His alpha side was enraged at the deception, the danger she had pulled into his territory. But his wolf felt a grudging, fierce respect for the sheer, stubborn will to survive that radiated from her. She had fought the wild, a packless, shiftless female, and kept 2 cubs alive. "You will no longer stay in the kennels," he said finally, his voice flat. Hope flared, bright and painful. "You and your children will be moved to a room in the servants' tower. You will be locked in." He pulled a key from the door and pocketed it. "You are a threat to my pack, and you are a target. You will stay there under guard until I decide what to do with you." The hope died. It was not a reward. It was a prison.
"Please," she begged, "don't take me from my children." "They will be locked in with you. Vorlag knows they exist. They are now as much a target as you are." He opened the door, called for the guards. "Move them, now! And double the patrols on the northern border. I want war scouts watching Vorlag's every move." He did not come here for an alliance. He came here for her. The war horns blared 3 days later, a deep, mournful sound that echoed from the northern mountains. A scout, his horse lathered, had galloped into the courtyard, screaming of an attack. Vorlag's warriors were pouring over the border, striking at the northern villages. Kalen moved with brutal efficiency. His warriors were armed and mounted within the hour. He stood in the courtyard, a black-armored god of war, his wolf barely contained beneath his skin. Marcus was at his side. "Marcus, you have the keep," Kalen commanded, swinging onto his massive war stallion. "Hold the citadel and guard the tower. Guard the female and her cubs with your life." "Alpha, you should not ride out," Marcus protested. "It could be a feint. He wants you." "He is butchering my people," Kalen snarled. "He wants a war. He will have one. Hold the keep." With a roar, he spurred his horse, and the Winterfang warriors thundered out of the great gates, a wave of steel and fury. Ilara heard the horns from her locked room in the tower. She, Leo, and Maya were huddled together on a small cot, their only furniture. The room was small, cold, but clean, and for 3 days they had been together. Martha, under the king's orders, brought them food. Leo paced the room like a tiny caged wolf. "The king is fighting," he said, his small fists clenched. "I heard the guards. It's the bad man." "We are safe here, Leo," Ilara whispered, pulling him close, though her own heart was hammering with terror. The hours dragged by. The sounds of the distant battle faded, and an eerie quiet fell over the keep. Then, just after dusk, Ilara heard it, a muffled thud from the hallway, then a choked gurgle. Leo's head snapped up. Ilara put a finger to her lips, her blood running cold. She moved silently to the heavy oak door and listened. She heard footsteps, too many. They were trying to be quiet, but they were heavy, and they smelled wrong, not like the Winterfang pack. They smelled of rot, of the blood moon. A key scraped in the lock. Ilara shoved her children under the cot. "Do not move, do not make a sound, no matter what." The door swung open. 3 large males in dark leather armor stood there. They were not Kalen's guards. Their faces were scarred, their eyes cruel. Leading them was a tall, thin wolf she recognized, Vorlag's beta, Malak. "Well, well," Malak sneered, his eyes landing on Ilara. "The little null wolf, and the traitor's cubs. Vorlag was right, the alpha went for the bait." "How did you get in?" Ilara whispered, backing away. "We have friends, mages who can mask a scent. It's amazing what a bit of gold and shadow magic can do. We've been inside your walls since the delegation arrived." He stepped into the room. "The king is busy. Vorlag wants the stone. He believes the traitor's line is the key. He will bleed the cubs, and you, and then he will watch." He nodded to his men. "Grab them." As they lunged for the bed, a figure flew into the room, roaring. It was Martha, the cook, wielding a massive meat cleaver.
"Get your filthy hands off my girl!" she screamed, swinging the cleaver and burying it in the shoulder of one of the wolves. He howled, and Malak, enraged, drew a dagger and plunged it into Martha's side. The older woman gasped, clutching the wound, and fell to her knees. "No!" Ilara screamed. Malak kicked Martha aside. "Stupid old bitch." He reached under the bed and dragged Maya out, screaming. "Mama!" Maya shrieked. "Put her down!" Leo shot out from under the bed, launching himself at Malak's leg, biting down with all his might. Malak roared, shaking his leg, and kicked Leo into the wall. The boy hit it with a sickening crack and slumped to the floor. "Leo!" Ilara's mind shattered. Something inside her, a thing that had been silent and cold her entire life, snapped. It was not a thought, it was an explosion. A wave of pure, searing heat erupted from her body. It was not a sound, but a pressure, a concussive force of golden light that blasted the 3 blood moon wolves backward, slamming them into the far wall. They collapsed, groaning, their armor smoking, their skin scorched. Ilara stood over her children, and she was glowing. A soft golden aura radiated from her skin, her eyes no longer brown, but molten gold. She was not a null wolf, she was not a dusk wolf, she was fire. Malak, stunned and burned, staggered to his feet. What are you?" Ilara didn't answer. She saw Martha bleeding, she saw Leo unmoving, she saw Maya crying in terror. A guttural snarl, a sound she had never made, ripped from her throat. She grabbed the fallen meat cleaver from the floor. Her eyes promised murder. Just as Malak raised his own blade to charge her, the doorway exploded. Kalen, in his full battle armor, spattered with blood and mud, burst into the room. He was not alone. His personal guard, the Iron Guard, followed, their blades drawn. The king's wolf had screamed. Halfway to the northern pass, it had clawed at his insides, roaring one word: "Mate! Mate! Danger!" He had ignored the feint, ignored the battle, and ridden back to the keep at a suicidal pace, his guard trailing behind him. He burst in to see his tower room in ruins, his cook bleeding out, and the children, and her. She was blazing like a star, a divine, terrifying angel of vengeance, holding a cleaver, shielding her young. His wolf howled in his head, a sound of pure, unadulterated recognition. Mate. Ours. The fight was over in seconds. Kalen and his elite guard were a blur of steel. They dispatched the dazed and injured Blood Moon wolves with brutal efficiency. Malak, seeing his king, tried to lunge at Ilara, using her as a shield. "Kalen!" Ilara screamed. Malak's blade flashed, not at her, but at Leo, who was just beginning to stir. Kalen moved faster than Ilara thought possible. He threw himself in front of his son, taking the long, shadow-cursed dagger deep in his side, just below his armor plating. Kalen roared, a sound of agony and rage, and drove his own sword straight through Malak's chest. Malak crumpled, dead. Kalen fell to one knee, clutching his side. Black, smoking blood poured from the wound. "Alpha!" his guard shouted. Get the children," Kalen grunted, pain radiating through him. The blade was poisoned, dark magic. He could feel it spreading, cold and numbing. "Kalen!" Ilara shrieked, her terror shattering her battle state. The golden light vanished. She was just Ilara again. She rushed to him, falling to her knees in front of him. "You're hurt." "It's dark magic," he gasped, his skin turning gray. "Can't heal." "No," she whispered. "No." She didn't know what she was doing. She only knew she couldn't let him die. She pressed her hands, the hands of a kennel servant, calloused and dirty, against his grievous wound. And she pushed. She pushed all the warmth, all the love for her children, all the desperate, terrified hope she had into him. The golden light flared again, but this time it flowed from her palms into his body. It was pure, clean, and blindingly hot. Kaelin roared as the light met the dark magic. Black smoke poured from the wound, dissolving into the air. The flesh beneath her hands knitted together, the dark veins of poison receding, the skin regaining its color. In seconds, the wound was gone.
Not even a scar remained. He stared at her, breathing heavily, his gray eyes wide with a profound, earth-shattering shock. His wolf was silent, stunned into awe. Elara, her power spent, collapsed against him, her body trembling. "I don't know," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what I am." Kaelin's arms, his strong, steady arms, wrapped around her. He ignored the blood, the dirt, the guards, the dying woman in the corner. He pulled her flush against his armor, burying his face in her hair, inhaling her scent. Not of rogue, not of null, but of sun, and heat, and home. "You are mine," he growled, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard from him. And this time, it was not a statement of ownership. It was a vow. He lifted her chin, and, in front of his entire personal guard, he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, claiming, ravaged kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had been starving and had just found his feast. It was the kiss of an Iron King, finally, utterly surrendering. The keep was in chaos. Kaelin, his strength returned, barked orders. "Get Martha to the healers, now! Use my chambers. Lock down the keep. Find every last blood moon rat and bring me their heads." He scooped up Elara, who had fainted from the exertion, in one arm and the still dazed Leo in the other. "You," he pointed to his most trusted guard, "carry the girl, gently." He bypassed the servants' tower and strode straight to the king's wing. He laid Elara on his own massive bed, pulling the fur coverings over her. He placed Leo beside her, and Maya, who was crying, was bundled up with them. He stood for a moment, just watching them. His family. He personally saw to Martha. The healers were struggling, the wound was deep. Kaelin laid his hand on Martha's forehead, and a residual spark of Elara's golden energy passed from him to her. The bleeding slowed. The healer stared, but Kaelin just nodded. She will live. He sent for his pack's chief elder, a blind, ancient she-wolf named Morwen. She was led into his chambers, her scent like dry leaves and old magic. She did not bow. She simply looked in the direction of the bed. "My king," she rasped, "you smell of the sun." "Elder," Kaelin said, his voice heavy, "look at her." Morwen moved to the bed. She did not look. She lifted Elara's limp arm, her gnarled fingers tracing the skin. Elara stirred, and the golden light pulsed just once under her skin. On her forearm, a faint, sun-shaped birthmark, invisible before, was now glowing like a warm ember. Morwen gasped, dropping the arm. "By the moon! It is true! We thought the myths were just myths." "What is she?" Kaelin demanded. "She is not a dusk wolf," Morwen whispered, her voice filled with awe. "She is a soul tawny, the last of the sun-touched. Her line, they were not just alphas, they were healers, protectors. Their power is the light of the moon given form. It is the only thing that can cleanse the shadow curse." Kaelin realized, the poison on the blade, Vorlak's magic. "He uses the shadow," Morwen said, her face grim, "and he knows what she is. He didn't just come for a traitor's daughter. He came for the only weapon that can destroy him."
And the sunstone? It does not belong to the blood moon. It belongs to her. It doesn't create her power. It amplifies it. Kalen's world, his iron-clad black and white world, tilted on its axis. He had taken in a beggar. He had claimed a myth. The next day, the throne room was packed. The entire court, all his warriors, the servants, everyone was assembled. Kalen stood on the dais, not on his throne, but beside it. Ilara stood with him. She was not in rags. She was in a simple, dark blue gown from the late queen's wardrobe. Her hair was clean and brushed, falling in soft waves. She was terrified, her hand gripping Kalen's, but she did not cower.
Leo and Maya stood in front of them, holding hands, their eyes wide. "You came for blood," Kalen's voice boomed, "and you will have it, but not here. Vorlag of the Blood Moon Pack has declared war. He tried to murder my people. He tried to steal from my house. He tried to kill my mate." A collective, shocked gasp. Seraphina, her face a mask of white-hot fury, stepped forward. "My king, you cannot! She is a rogue, a null-scent. She is nothing." "She is my queen," Kalen stated, his voice final. He raised Ilara's hand, and the sun mark on her arm glowed for all to see. "She is Ilara of the Sultani, the last of the sun-touched, and she is my fated mate." He looked at the crowd, his gaze daring anyone to challenge him. No one did. Vorlag's treachery is now known. He murdered his alpha. He uses dark magic. He has poisoned his own packlands. We will not just defend our borders. We will cleanse the north. I offer sanctuary to any Blood Moon wolf who flees Vorlag's tyranny and bends the knee. He then did something no one expected. He bent down and lifted Leo and Maya, placing them on the steps of the throne. "And these are not rogue cubs," he declared, his voice softening for the first time. "They are my children. They are the new blood of this pack, the heirs of Winterfang." Ilara looked at him, tears streaming down her face. He had taken her bargain and transformed it. That night, the castle was quiet. The children were asleep in a beautifully furnished room adjoining the king's, safe, warm, and guarded. Ilara stood on the balcony of Kalen's chambers, looking out over the moonlit, snow-covered mountains. She heard him come up behind her, his large, warm body pressed against her back and his arms wrapped around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder. They stood in silence for a long time. "You offered yourself to me forever," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. I didn't know what I was offering," she whispered, leaning back into his strength. She finally felt safe. "And I didn't know what I was accepting," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "I thought I was taking in a servant, a complication." He turned her in his arms, his gray eyes no longer iron, but a soft, molten silver in the moonlight. His iron control was finally broken, revealing the guarded, lonely male beneath. "You saved me, Ilara," he said, his voice thick. "And not just from Malik's blade. You saved me from the ice, from this." He motioned to the cold, empty fortress. She lifted a hand, her calloused, scarred hand, and cupped his rough jaw. "And you fed my children, Kalen." It was the simplest, most profound truth in their new world. His lips met hers, no longer a desperate claim, but a slow, reverent kiss, a promise. The bargain was fulfilled. She was his forever, not as a servant, but as his queen, his mate, and his salvation. The Iron King had at last found his son.